to the Town Council meeting for Tuesday evening, January 17th, 2017. It is 6:02, and I'd like to call the meeting to order now. So, Town Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Yes, thank you. Councilmember Durham?
Here.
Councilmember Dorman?
Here.
Councilmember Moeller?
Here.
Vice Mayor Dornbecker?
Here.
Please let the record reflect that Mayor Dunbar is excused.
Will you please all join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
There is a spider crawling on your desk by your hand right now. Don't you want to get it?
Now, we're going to move on to the agenda, and I'll need a motion, please, to adopt this evening's agenda.
I make a motion we adopt this evening's agenda.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
This is the time for public comment on matters that are not listed on the agenda. If anyone would like to speak, please come forward now. Seeing no one, we will move right along then to the consent calendar. Do I have a motion for the approval of the consent calendar?
I make a motion we approve the consent calendar.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. For our, we'll move along to presentations, and for our first presentation this evening, we have the public safety report from our sheriff. Please.
Turned on. Did you turn it on? John, would you check to see if that's turned on?
Yes.
Thank you.
Welcome, Sergeant Hallman.
Good evening. Let's see if this is on the side. I think there we go. We'll find out.
There we go.
So, you should have all been provided with the spreadsheet that I put together for comparing the our statistics for the fourth quarter of 2016. Comparing
I'm not
them.
actually hearing you. I'm sorry, on the
okay.
mic. Is the mic on? There it is. Okay.
So,
Move that thing up, John.
What's that?
You can raise the podium up. There's a little switch on it.
Here, I'll show you.
much better. That'd be better than me leaning over. Is that better?
Yes, thank you.
All right, thank you. So I provided you with a spreadsheet comparing the third and fourth quarter of 2016 and the fourth quarter of 2016 with 2015. So what you're going to see is that crimes against persons, typically any type of battery or domestic violence, stayed static. And one of the things I did here is I just wanted to go through and kind of give you a high-level overview of what we have and what we've done. So we did increase pedestrian vehicle checks throughout this quarter by quite a bit. On crimes against property, there was a slight increase on theft and vandalism, and I do mean slight, but it was noticed. As you may notice, or you may have read, we had several vehicles that were left unlocked that were caught on surveillance video where people were trying car doors, and the cars that were unlocked, people were going inside looking for items of value and taking them if they were in view. There were several cars in that one incident, and then we also had one incident where there was numerous vandalisms by one individual, which was also partially caught on surveillance. We increased patrol checks by 4 times as many as we have in the past quarters, and we want to make sure that our eyes are out there as much as possible, and also our presence to either catch or prevent that type of activity, let them know that that's not going to be allowed. Traffic collisions, we had a slight decrease, but we still increased traffic stops because it hasn't stopped me from noticing people needing education in the area of traffic signals, traffic stops, or just courteous driving. So I did provide you with the specific statistics. I'll leave you to read that. I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about our involvement in the last quarter. We were involved fairly heavily in Yountville Days Parade, which was my first time. It was a great time. I really enjoyed it. I actually got to finish it before I had to leave on an emergency call, so I got right to the end. The Festival of Lights, also got to personally be involved in that. That was a good time. Some other things that we did, we were able to do the Touch a Truck with Community Center. I personally was involved in the Rancho de Napa Emergency Preparedness Training and panel. We worked with a couple of different runs that we had here in town and a couple of smaller events, and we did work with the Vets Home on some events, but these were just some highlights for you on things we were involved in. Then I wanted to talk to you about some new equipment that we've deployed for our team here at in Yountville and throughout the county. So one of the things I wanted to talk to you about, am I okay to approach and just show you equipment?
Sure.
Is that all right? Sometimes I like to be able to handle things, if that's all right. So first thing I wanted to talk to you about is the body-worn camera. All deputies are now given one of these, and by policy are using them. It's the VIEVU LE4. It has 12 hours recording of high-def video and audio, and each deputy, sergeant,
You need to take your mic with you.
Thank you.
It's a handheld.
No, that's okay. So, too many things in my hands, it will go bad. I'll end up dropping something. The nice thing about it is at the end of each shift, you're able to put this into a docking station. It goes to a secure location where people are not able to change the video, alter it in any way, and it goes into a secure server. It's for review by supervision or administration. And then it's maintained for periods of time based on what type of video it is. In each video, the deputy will sit down at the end of shift and document what was involved, where they were, this type of thing. So it's a great tool. So just to let you see exactly what it is.
Very cool. Well, that's
I'm sure you've seen the
very neat.
media coverage.
Oh, yeah.
These type of devices.
Yeah. That's really cool. Thank you.
Yep, you were right.
It's okay.
That one down.
And Sergeant Holman, if you briefed me correctly, if the green light is on, that means smile, right?
Yes, well, so the green light is blinking on the top. I actually, if you see the white square, I'm recording. And I'll tell you, it is an amazing tool for us as law enforcement. We should be happy to have it. I would talk to anyone that would listen and just tell them, hey, if I have this is probably one of my best tools in my armory. Because not only, I don't have to worry about, I get to choose what I say and do. But when other people all of a sudden start talking or maybe behaving a certain way, and then realize that there's a camera on my chest, they look down and you can see their attention get really focused and their behavior changes. It's wonderful. We don't have a lot of that here in Yountville, thankfully, but I've been on a few incidents where people all of a sudden realized that I was recording and their speech and everything else just got substantially more flowery. So the other thing that I had asked our administration for years, I had done training for less lethal options for our department because I think that is an option we should have in our community rather than just going directly to a lethal option. And so they recently purchased our office here in Yountville a less lethal launcher. It is a 40 millimeter projectile. It has a foam tip. And very often if you need to use a use of force, you're able to redirect someone or get their attention or stop violent behavior without creating minimal injury or no injury, which I think is a great option, especially nowadays with the type of incidents that we have to deal with. And if you don't mind, I will not touch your nameplate, but I'd like you to at least have a chance to see this.
You're still going to carry a gun.
Absolutely. It's just an option.
No, I'm very glad to hear this. Oh, that's kind of I wouldn't want to be hit by that.
I wouldn't
though.
either. The whole idea behind it is that you're putting the force over a larger area with a foam tip, and it's dramatically less injury, if any.
Is there a reason you're not letting us touch the launcher?
This part?
Is that the launcher?
No, I can actually bring the launcher in, but I was
I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding with you.
I don't blame you.
I was concerned that if I walked in holding that, people might be worried.
We,
And I'm not here to make you nervous. So that's what I have for you tonight. Thank you very much.
well, that was very good news, and thank you so much for your report. We're happy that things are static as far as crime in Yountville.
Thank you.
All right. Next, we will have our Public Safety Quarterly Report from CAL FIRE, and Battalion Chief Jason Martin will be giving the report for Chief Buckmar.
Good
Welcome.
evening. How's everybody doing tonight? I have no toys, so I hope you weren't expecting me to show something. So tonight we'll go over the fourth quarter for 2016. As typical, our uptick in calls is still medical aids, which is always going to be the forefront of all the call types that we have. I didn't bring a comparison to the last quarter, and I apologize for that because it would have been kind of nice to see where we're at with the travelers and everybody we get to visit. But we do know we ran 428 calls in last quarter, 65 to town of Yountville, 210 to the Veterans Home. Within the county area, we ran 151 calls, and then just 2 calls into Napa City on AutoAid. Some major events that we had, this station here, Station 12 out of Yountville, responded to a couple structure fires. One was down in the Carneros area off of Highway 121, and the other one was up in Angwin. And those crews spent a couple hours there doing the typical overhaul and everything else that we do to support those types of incidents. And if you do recall, during the summer months, we did have our vegetation fire in Dry Creek. That was 50 acres. We're really fortunate with that one. To be able to keep it to 50 acres, we used the crews out of Station 12 once again, and also our volunteers out of Station 16, which is there in Dry Creek. Special events, we hit the holiday season, which is always everybody's favorite. We had another successful year with the toy drive, as always. The community involvement with that, plus the opportunities that present themselves for us to get out into the community, intermix with everybody, share some information, and take care of those less fortunate. Festival of Lights. Crazy. I don't know what's going on with Santa's sleigh, but this year Truck 12 was able to facilitate a ride for Santa for the Festival of Lights, which is also a very fun event for us to take care of. Looks like Station 12 also added a couple of extra lights and decorations, I think, at the station, which is kind of fun. And we like to be part of that community. Training-wise for the community, we did hands-only CPR. We are really pushing hard with the local EMS agency as well to provide that type of training for the citizens to help increase our survivability rates for folks that happen to have a heart attack. They did that class for the Napa Valley Lodge here in Yountville, and those skills are valuable for any of the citizens. So it's kind of a pledge that we've made. We're using gosh darn it, an application right now that alerts us if there's a CPR card, or I'm sorry, a CPR call type, and it'll alert the closest responder to that, on duty, off duty. So that's actually a really neat thing that's happening through the EMS agency.
Can I ask you, when will you be doing that again in Yountville?
You know, great question. I mean, we can schedule it if there is a need and there's a community base. I support it 100%.
Actually, I will share with you, the current staffing is working with the Kiwanis Club of Yountville to work on a schedule and a time, so I would anticipate you'll see some community workshops in the next quarter.
Great.
Great. Okay, we're kicking off our Napa County Volunteer Fire Academy. We do a lot of work here in the town of Yountville, out of Station 12, and also over at the training tower. We have a pretty big group this year, which is nice to see. And they're members from all the communities we have within Napa County. And I think the number's around 22 or so, which is a fairly large group, which is kind of nice. And they'll go through all of the basic understanding of the fire and EMS. They will then be, once they graduate, they'll go back out to all one of the 9 community stations and be part of the community volunteer group that we have.
Right.
Okay. And that's all I have, unless we have any questions.
Do you have any questions for Battalion Chief Martin? No? Well, we want to thank you very, very much. We feel so blessed to have you right across the highway. So,
Appreciate it. It's a pleasure.
yeah, thank you.
All right. Everybody have a good night. Thank you.
All right. Moving along, we will now have invite up our Library Commissioner, Scott Owens, for our Napa County Library Commission update.
Didn't know about this feature until tonight. That's great.
Does he have, do you have the pointer up there?
I think
You
so.
do, great.
Yes.
Okay,
Thank you. Let's see. Good evening, members of the Town Council. I'm Scott Owens, Library Commissioner for the Town of Yountville and the Chair of the Napa County Library Commission. I'm pleased to be here this evening to report on the recent activity of the Napa County Library Commission, specifically the recent recommendation of a new funding model for the Napa County Library System. I will review the proposed models, the impact of such a model, as well as progress made since 2010 and the current opportunities. A brief history, some of which may be a recap for many of you. But in 2010, there was a circulation-based funding model that was implemented by the library director countywide, circulation-based, and of note, it spread revenue via circulation of media, books, and other items from the library, and set base hours for each location. The release of this funding model coincided with the opening of the new Yountville Community Center, which houses the library. Reduced hours based on this cost allocation model resulted in some frustration and subsequent pursuit for equity, namely more open hours for our branch. In 2012, the Napa County Auditor Controller revised the accounting structure, and staff was able to monitor each budget specifically for the 4 locations in the county. This was good news for the county, but it quickly antiquated the cost allocation model that was set up in 2010 because of a new system used by the county and one system that was meant to distribute resources evenly throughout the county, that being the CAM, cost allocation model. In fiscal year 2013 and 14 and beyond, there were fluctuating costs per hour based on this model, as well as response time for receiving information, namely cost per hour, specifically for Yountville. The allocations and additions for the cost allocation model from fiscal year 2010 and 11 through to 13-14 were a base amount of hours, base being 16, 3 additional hours to a total of 19.5. There were 17.5 hours based on the CAM and 2 hours in lieu of rent by the town of Yountville. This is per a staff report of July 16, 2013. Volunteer hours increased the number of open hours from 0 to 6. This was it is a unique arrangement and an example of collaboration and negotiation for the greater good at a cost of $0. The ongoing agreement between the town of Yountville and the county for the town of Yountville to fund additional hours. It goes back to prior to 2009, ranging in an amount from 2 hours to 4.5 hours. So our total open hours in this time frame through 13-14 was 30. Soon after 2014, especially as I became involved in the Library Commission in July of 2014, there was a request for more and a new model. The input that we as commissioners brought to the commission meetings was a request for more hours beginning in March of 2015. We noted that the model, the cost allocation model, was antiquated and often difficult to produce a result of a factor that was universally understood. Napa County Library staff provided reports on various factors for consideration in May and June of 2016. Those being card holder addresses throughout the county, Wi-Fi usage, population in and around each of the 4 location or branches, public access or computer use, circulation, which is a model or a factor we're most familiar with, circulation of media, program attendance, and visitation and activity. So soon after May of 2016, allocations in addition to the cost allocation model, in July of 2016, the Yountville Library was provided with 4 additional hours, quite unexpectedly. The library director has the authority to assign additional hours or reallocate minor funding as long as it does not violate union rules, decrease other locations' hours, or affect other locations' programs. Because library staff arrive at 9 a.m. and our library was open beginning at 11 a.m., those 4 additional hours, director discretion, are between the hours of 10 and 11, which equaled 4 more hours for the library to be open, a current total of 34. 10 open from 10 to 5 Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. That's where those 4 additional hours went. And the process for reviewing and recommending a new funding model began after our May 2016 meeting, began in July, with Commissioners Kindig, Kruger, and Owens, myself. Kindig being the past chair and Ms. Kruger the current vice chair. Not only did the commissioners on an ad hoc committee of the Library Commission bring expertise, and I speak about Pamela Kindig, who was the city controller for many years. So she quite familiar with the budget, the operation for the county, and such systems. But we also brought the voice of the patrons for a request for more hours. It was not only from the town of Yountville, but also American Canyon and the Napa Main Library. Each requested additional hours. So we looked at ways that we could reevaluate the current model with hopeful results to get more hours for our libraries. Those items being circulation, activity and visitation, and programs rose to the fore for something to look at that was practical and a different model, not only based on circulation. Concurrently, in addition to reviewing the budget for additional operating hours, we looked at staffing hours, and that was a big part of the meeting. 4 meetings from July through October, 1 each month. The additional hours exercise that the committee reviewed, each of the scenarios, those being overtime of existing staff, hiring new staff, or sharing new part-time staff, each resulted in a budget request that outweighed the available revenue for increasing hours. Therefore, it was not viable. So the committee requested that staff focus on circulation and visitation as factors for a new methodology. The committee reviewed a weighted 60-40, 50-50, and 40-60 average and calculation using circulation and visitation, a new combination beyond the singular circulation. The factors that went into this model are, for the budget, salary and benefits, services and supplies, and other expenses. For the revenue, it's the specific branch donations, copy revenue from our copy machines, the community room rentals, and for the town of Yountville, the additional hours that the town generously funds. Noting that circulation, specifically here for Yountville, of media, tangible media, has declined in the past 3 years. It was a more modern approach to include something in addition to that basic circulation. That other factor is visitations. We've had an increase in patrons coming into the library over these past months, past year, as well as very successful program attendance for our reading programs in the early mornings during the week from kids who come from all around the county to our library for the reading programs. Therefore, the recommendation at the most recent meeting of the Napa County Library Commission, at which the commission as a whole reviewed the models that the ad hoc committee brought forward and that the Napa County Library staff developed after the 4 meetings. The county commission voted unanimously to recommend the circulation visitation model to the Napa County Board of Supervisors. We saw this as a fair and equitable distribution of resources and a calculation of the individual branch expenses or budget that went into this factor. With the proposed model, the allocations and additions look this way. The base number of hours from the financial model has increased from a base of 16, which is what the fiscal year 2010 original model stated, to 20. The volunteer hours and the town-funded hours are forecasted to remain the same, as well as the director discretionary 4 additional hours. Therefore, the new total will be 34.5 open hours. This base increased by 0.5 in the base hours model, and or 4 hours from the original model, with the assumptions that I mentioned. The volunteer hours and the town of Yountville funded hours will continue.
A quick question for you, Scott. I don't see the 2 hours by our lease agreement.
That is what I mentioned earlier, and it is something that the town and the library director will meet subsequent to this financial model to review and develop a new agreement. And it is, as I referenced earlier, included in the existing agreement, which began in fiscal year 13-14, and that is specifically mentioned there, especially from the staff report in July of 2013.
Can I interrupt for a question?
Sure.
So, before this new model, according to my calculation, you said we were open 34 hours, and that included the 2 that Steve was referring to, but I actually got an extra 34.5 because we're open for 7.5 on Saturday. So basically, if we add in the 2 extra hours, that's, I don't know if you're going to renegotiate that.
I don't know, I'm just saying the current agreement says that in lieu of rent, we get 2 additional library. I need to review the agreement, but it's pretty simple.
So, I mean, we'll just assume these hours are correct, and maybe we'll get 2 more based on that agreement. So basically, we're the same.
We are the same with an additional 0.5, half hour.
Well, I think that half hour was just from the first calculation. I think you forgot that we're open 7.5 on Saturday, perhaps. I got 34.5, but anyway, it's a half
Perhaps
an
I
hour.
did. Okay.
But maybe not. Okay. All right. So basically, everything's the same.
Yes.
Okay.
The risk and impact of this proposed model. One, the visitation as a new factor. How many people visit the library is counted by an electronic door counter. There are 2 of them located in the library, one inside the reading room and one inside the main entrance off of the center of Washington Street. The fact that this door counter has worked sporadically since 2014 is of concern and something that I have mentioned, and the library staff is committed to remedying this countywide with better equipment for the upcoming fiscal year. The increase in cost per hour. This new model does increase the cost per hour that Yountville has been paying since 2009 through the current. So it does increase. That is a risk. That is something that the town and the library director will have the opportunity to meet and discuss to see what type of agreement could be made for the future, for how many additional hours beyond the base that the county will provide. And the impact is more accurate reporting. As I mentioned earlier, in 2010 and 12, when 2 models, a cost allocation model and a new accounting system being used by the county, were operating separately. And to bring those 2 together resulted in delay in receiving information and sometimes no information. So this more accurate reporting based on the staff analysts at the library will continue. There's a countywide implementation that will be for fair and equitable distribution of resources, and the County Board of Supervisors will ultimately decide on this recommendation at its meeting on January 31st. In conclusion, this process was a very, I think, helpful and successful exercise, as it was done by committee, recommended by the commission with the voice of the various branches in the county. And here in Yountville, it was in consultation with the town manager, the library ad hoc committee of the town council, and the Friends of the Yountville Library. It's inclusive of the commission's vote for a recommendation. And I do want to thank council members Dornbecker and Moeller for their ongoing dedication to the system, our newest council member Dorman for her interest, and town manager Steve Rogers for his guidance during this process. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. Are there questions from the council?
Yeah, I would like, you showed a graph that showed that circulation was going down over the last 3 years. And do you have a graph that shows that visitation, what visitation is doing over that same time?
I have the most recent handouts from the commission meetings, yes, but
And
not here on the screen.
is it going up or down?
It's going up. So my calculation was up by perhaps 200 each month in these recent months.
So we're going up 200 visitors per month, let's say over the last 6 months, compared to the previous 3 years?
Compared to the previous months.
To compare to, so there's, so before, are we doubling? Is it 200 a month? I'm just trying to get a sense. And the reason I'm kind of asking kind of goes back to what we're going to get charged per hour, because by choosing the circulation visitation, that's why I really want to see these visitation numbers. I mean, that's a 20% increase over what we've been paying before. if we just stay with the circulation model, the increase is not nearly as large. So,
When the commission as a whole reviewed how the model worked for all branches, it was fair and equitable, and I think a more modern approach to go with circulation and visitation. So whereas circulation may have kept Yountville's cost per hour for this fiscal year down as compared to circulation and visitation, it was not the same for the other branches. And in my research to substantiate my recommendation for a combination like this, going to the libraries and seeing people accessing the computers, people there for reading programs, patrons using the library, perhaps to check out books at that same time, but using it as a community center. It seems like an opportunity to include that in a funding model that may result in an increase for hours from the county in the future.
So is that part of the model? If visitation continues to increase, we'll get more hours?
It could possibly be, yes.
Because the reason I was trying to get some information, because you said Steve might be negotiating some of the price per hour. So I'm trying to give him some good information so he could use that, because it seems like American Canyon, we're the only ones that pay.
Correct.
And
Yountville
so-
is the only branch that chooses to purchase additional hours. In the bylaws for the commission, for the county, at the end of each budget season or fiscal year, beginning of each fiscal year, the library director can approach the various municipalities to offer funding of additional hours. And Yountville has been the only branch to do that thus far.
But so my point is, if we go with circulation visitation, the hourly cost goes up for all the branches, but it doesn't go up for Napa, Maine. If we stay with just circulation, then the price is a lot lower. So I would just vote for paying the county less money per hour. Just as an FYI. And another just comment is our librarians our library's not open on Friday. They go down to Napa, Maine, and they work there. Seems like it wouldn't cost any more money if they could just stay at our library. We're not buying any more hours. We're not paying anybody. They're still working. They just get to stay here. Maybe that's something that Steve could also kind of talk about, because they're open. They have to have 2 shifts down there. I'm just kind of hoping that maybe our librarians could stay here and do the work that they would do at Napa, Maine, which is, I think it's at the research desk. So just something to consider, that we could negotiate that doesn't cost the county any more money.
Thank you.
That's
Are
it.
there other questions from the council? I have one. Oh, no, please.
Not a question, but more of a comment. I had a large group at my office hours last night, and we had a very good conversation. And I just want to remind everyone that of your position as a volunteer and the time that you have obviously put into this, and the time for Yountville. And this, I just want to call you out on that, because I think it is just great. And I'm encouraged and very excited by it. So I wanted to thank you for it as well.
Thank you.
And then, Scott, I thought that I remembered that the librarians are there before the library opens. And can you explain to me why they would be there with the doors locked?
As I learned, and as I now understand, the librarians arrive at 9 a.m., and the Yountville Library historically opened at 11 a.m., so that 2 hours was used to reshelve books, set up for the new day, take care of administrative matters, whatever admin tasks could be done during that time. The library director observed that and chose to cut that time in half, that administrative preparation time, and open the doors for that extra hour. Instead of being open at 11, open at 10.
I see. And did you also say in your presentation that the town funding library hours began in 2009?
In the information that I read in preparation for this meeting, as well as for the recommendations for more hours in March of 2015, yes, there are documents that state prior to 2009 that the town funded 2 to 4.5 hours.
Thank you.
If I could, that's correct. The town has historically provided additional funding even before the community center. We actually took a short hiatus because our immediate reaction after the new CAM model and the base and the hourly rate was, I think indignation probably would be the best adjective that came out, and then we've slowly been working towards, as a community, what are a combination. I do have a question, Scott. You indicated that for us it looks like about the same hour allocation. We have to clarify our one agreement understanding. Did any of the branches end up with a different allocation from this exercise?
I believe that American Canyon's hours were also changed. I don't recall if it was an increase or a decrease, but the fact that Yountville went from a station designation to a branch designation in line with American Canyon, whereas American Canyon has a larger population and has been historically open more hours, their minimum and Yountville's minimum are now the same.
And I do think that's a good footnote, because the prior contract, had it been fully executed, started at either 10 or 12 hours, and now it says shall be a minimum of 20. So that is a change from the prior model. But I was just curious as to, because I know one of the frustrations that we've had, and I think it's similar to what I heard from some of the library commission members, is when you have a model, you need to review the inputs, and they should be adjusted periodically so you make an educated assumption as to whether there should be any changes or not. So is your anticipation that the data is going to be collected more reliably and then reviewed so that if we use it, because I know, I think I can fairly well speak for the four, or even the person in spirit who's missing. If we end up with bad data on the visitation, and that's an area where we're working to improve in our community and how it uses it, that's going to be very frustrating to us, especially if it results in a higher operating cost or a recommendation for decreased hours. I think I'm pretty safe in saying that. So I think that's just something we want to work with. I do say that this town was never really comfortable with the very detailed CAM formula that was put together, and we are probably, I guess, say we think this is simpler, but we kind of want to make sure we see how it all plays out before we get too excited.
And I have one further question. So if both visitation and circulation go up, that should impact the number of hours as well. Is that true?
It could, in that the cost per hour, or the revenue allocated to Yountville, may increase. So the revenue may increase, which could allow for more open hours funded by the county.
I see. That's what I meant, of course.
And historically, if the circulation model, ideally, if Yountville was to have a very large circulation, that was to have factored into the revenue that came to the branch for its open hours to operate. However, as Steve alluded to, the accuracy of the information coming out of that model fluctuated. It was difficult to, one, calculate it, or to match an estimated calculation, which was the cost per hour that was presented to the town. So I do hope that in the near future, should this model be adopted by the board of the County Board of Supervisors, that it will result in more accurate data, more accurate and timelier reporting.
Well, thank you very much. I know that you've, do you have a question?
I just had a comment to echo Councilmember Durham, and that is, I thank you for reaching out to me, and I've enjoyed getting to know some of the process and you have shared with me your love of and respect for libraries, and your caring about the town is obvious, and I just think you have done a really good job in difficult circumstances to put together a creative solution. So thank you.
Thank you. And if I may add, there is such a gem that we have in this county, the county-wide collection. What we as a branch, as part of this county system, has access to is a real gem. It's comparable to other larger library systems that I've used as a student, as a working adult, and to have this resource here is really amazing.
Well, it's part of a much larger, what is that program called? When we had the tour, we talked about of the library the other night.
There's an interlibrary loan system,
Yeah, that's
as well as
very
a
large.
connection to other libraries, both universities as well as county libraries throughout the state. And with the interlibrary loan system, we're able to connect beyond California as well.
Well, that's a great system, and I want to echo the sentiments. Thank you very, very much for your hard work. I enjoy working with you, and we'll continue the quest for more hours. Thank you.
Sure, you're very welcome.
All right. So, now we have our presentation of our comprehensive annual financial report for fiscal year ending June 30th by Mr. Badawi.
So before Ahmed starts, coming up, Ahmed, I just wanted to...
Welcome.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me now? There we go. Okay. So I just wanted to thank Ahmed and his firm for their work with us. As you know, this is an annual report that we work in concert with our auditors, but the town benefits from having an independent review of our operations and our financials. And so Ahmed is here to provide us that background, but just wanted to express my appreciation to the firm and the staff who's worked very hard to bring this document together.
Thank you. Welcome.
Well, thank you. Good evening, Madam Mayor and members of the council and the audience.
Yes. You should be, there you go.
All right. Great. So thank you for having me. I'm here to present to you the result of the 2016 audit of the town financial records. So what I'm going to be covering today, I'll let you know who the engagement team were, what were the deliverables and the scope of our audit, areas that we emphasized on, what kind of opinion we issued on the financial statements, also communicate to you some of the required communication that we have to communicate as your independent auditors, let you know about some of the new accounting standards that are coming your way, and see if you have any questions for me. So I'm going to start on slide number 4, and this is the composition of our engagement team. I was the engagement partner. We always have a quality control partner. She's always in the background, so no interaction directly with the town. And her role is to review my work and make sure that I adhere to professional standards. We also had Mitesh as our manager, so he's really the day-to-day supervisor of the audit and while we were here. And then we had 2 staff that were also involved in the audit, and we have access to our IT specialist in case the town start developing its own application or use complicated accounting systems that would require more advanced knowledge than a regular CPA. So we will use our IT specialist for that. In terms of the deliverables and the scope of our audit, we were mainly engaged to report on the town's basic financial statements. That's basically the report that have information about all your funds and all your assets and liabilities. We were also engaged to perform a compliance audit on the Transportation Development Act. Those are some funds that the town received from MTC, from the Metropolitan Transportation Commission, for transportation purposes. And we basically perform an audit to make sure that the funds were spent in the right place. You are subject to what we call government auditing standards, which requires us to consider the internal controls over financial reporting when we are planning the audit and communicate to you any weaknesses that we find in those controls. We also perform what we call an agreed upon procedure on the GAN limit, or the appropriation limit, and I'm going to have a slide about that in a little bit. And then finally, we're required to communicate with the governing body, which is what I'm doing today. In terms of areas that we emphasized on, there were really two major areas that we emphasized on, revenues and the pension. Revenues obviously is by default an area of a higher risk. Just in any audit, the motivation to overstate revenue is usually higher than the motivation to overstate expenditures or anything of that nature. So we send a lot of confirmations. Obviously, TOT is a big revenue source in the town, so we send confirmations to a lot of the hotels, and we ask them to confirm how much they pay the town. We also get confirmations from the county, from the state, and basically make sure that we reconcile those to what the town reported in its accounting records. For pension, we obtain journal entries from the town. We also obtain a lot of information from CalPERS and from CalPERS auditors to give us more assurance about the numbers that are coming from CalPERS. We also evaluate the actuarial reports that CalPERS issues and make sure that we are in agreement with the actuarial assumptions, and I'm going to have a couple of slides also discussing pension in more detail. In terms of the auditor's report, this is probably the part that you're interested in the most. We have issued what we call an unmodified opinion. That is a clean opinion, if we put it in simple terms. And the audit opinion state that the audit was performed in accordance with generally accepted auditing standards and government auditing standards. What an unmodified opinion really means, it means that we believe that the financial statements of the town are fairly stated in all material respects, that accounting principles or accounting standards have been consistently applied, that estimates are reasonable, and that all disclosures are properly reflected in the financial statements. So that's really what an unmodified opinion means, and that's obviously the type of opinion you want to receive. Wanted to give you just a little bit of a summary of what's in your financial statements in terms of the numbers. So this is the composition of your assets over the last 3 years. And like most of the cities we audit, the two largest assets you have are your cash and investments and your capital assets. Capital assets are your investment in streets and roads and buildings and things of that nature. I would say for the most part, everything was consistent. During fiscal year 16, there were additional funds from Measure A that were used for capital purposes, so that you can see that some of the receivables went up, and also capital assets went up as a result of that. But other than that, everything else was fairly consistent. On the liability side, you will see that the two big liabilities you have are your bonds payable, which is what we call the long-term debt, and your pension liability. Those are the two large liabilities that are outstanding as of 6/30/2016. Again, no major fluctuation there. We're going to talk about the pension, the long-term debt, just a regular pay down of the town's liabilities. So no major fluctuation there. This is a summary of your net position, or what you can call equity, your assets minus your liabilities, and is normally broken down into how much of your equity is tied up into your infrastructure and streets and roads. That's what we refer to as net investment in capital assets. How much are restricted by a third party? So, for example, if you have grants, unspent grant money, or like the Measure A funds or the TVA, those would be in the restricted category, and that means that the council cannot really change the purpose of those funds, of how they can be used. And then the unrestricted amount is really the amount that is under your control. And I guess the good thing is that this amount is positive. When we implemented the new pension standards, a lot of the cities and towns went negative in that amount. So because of large pension liability that was outstanding. So the fact that you're still positive after implementing that, it's definitely a good sign compared to many other cities. In terms of changes in net position, this is basically your operating income, your revenues minus your expenses. And we break it down into the governmental activities, those are all your governmental funds, and the business type activities, which are the proprietary, the water, for example. You will see that things are fairly consistent, except in the governmental activities there was a big increase, and that's mainly due to the Measure A funds, the additional Measure A funds. It was about $3 or something million. Other than that, everything else seems to be fairly consistent. And then one of the things we always like to compare is what we call the net cost of service to tax revenues. The net cost of service is we will look at all the departments in the town and how much does it cost to run these departments, and we will subtract from that any revenues that those departments are able to generate on their own. This can be grants, can be fees charged to users, and the idea is to determine how much has to be covered by tax revenues. And you can see that your tax revenues are significantly higher than your net cost of service. Your net cost of service was about close to $4 million, and your tax revenues were about $9.6 million. You can see that your net cost of service have gone dramatically down compared to last year. And the reason for that is because, again, the Measure A funds works to offset those expenditures in these departments. So that's the reason why that you see this big fluctuation. But
So if you were to back out Measure A, would it be pretty comparable?
it would be pretty consistent with the prior years, which is around the $7 million or so. Focusing on the general fund, again, general fund looks pretty healthy. We look at your unrestricted fund balance, the fund balance that is under your control, and we compare that to annual expenditures. And the idea is to see if all your revenue sources, under the very unlikely circumstances that they stop coming in, how long can the town continue to pay its bills? And we have determined that you probably can continue to pay your bills for about 10 months, just using your general fund balance. However, when I say unrestricted, that doesn't mean that those funds have not been designated for specific purposes, but they're just under your control, that you can change that designation, you can decide to spend them in different ways. This is a very healthy ratio. The Government Finance Officers Association recommend minimum of 2 months. So obviously you're at 10 months, so that's significantly higher than the minimum requirement. For GAN limits or appropriation limit, so appropriation limit is really something that was introduced by Proposition 4 and then later amended by Proposition 111. And it really imposes restrictions on how much the town can budget on an annual basis from its revenue sources, mainly the tax revenue sources. And the reason why I wanted to basically put that slide is because the town is actually very close to its limit, which is not very common in a lot of the cities that we audit. The limit is calculated based on how much were your expenditures or your appropriation in a base year, which I believe was 86, 87. And then every year it gets adjusted by inflation factor and population growth factors. So as of fiscal year 16 and fiscal year 15, your appropriation limit was 7.2 and 6.9 million. The amount of general fund appropriation that were subject to that limit were about 6.2 and 5.8 million over the last 2 years. So you're really within $1 million difference. The town had been getting the exemption or extension on an annual basis. We understand that there is a new property that was sold that will increase dramatically the assessed valuation. I have to say that this is really strictly a legal matter in terms of how is it possible to increase the limit as a result of that. What I know is that the way to increase the limit is by the population factor and the growth factors. So, of course, the town can consult with the legal counsel on what are the possible ways to change that, because that obviously would be very helpful, but I am not aware of how can this be accomplished.
It's voter approved too, is that right? So we just have to ask the voters as soon as possible, next time we have an election, like we always do. Okay.
All right, so that's for the GAN limit. And, for pension liability, I actually those two slides. The first two slides is really, if you want to read them, they're pretty technical, but so it's not really my intention to get into a lot of technical discussions. But pension liability in any pension plan, including the town's plan, there are a lot of changes that happen every year, and these are some of the changes that may possibly happen in your pension plan every year. The ones listed in blue, the town have to recognize them immediately on their books in the year that the change happened. The ones listed in red, they get amortized over a period of time. It varies, but maximum of 5 years. So during that time, we create what we call a deferred inflows and deferred outflows account to hold those amounts in there and spread them over time. On this slide here, you will see that the town pension expense for the year, for fiscal year 16, was $132,000. Your contribution for the year was $428,000. So the pension expense is significantly different than the amount of contribution. And the reason for that is because there are a lot of other factors that goes into pension expense. It's no longer accounted for based on contributions. But to make it more simple and just to give you what the final numbers are, these are your final numbers. You have in the plan, you have about $9.4 million in assets. You have about $12.4 million in liabilities. That leaves you with approximately $3 million in unfunded liability. That's what the town have to make up for in the future. I do want to caution you that this is really one giant estimate by CalPERS. And the CalPERS assumption were 7.65% rate of return. I wanted to show you that if the rate of return changed by 1%, the numbers would change dramatically. If it goes down to 6.65, your liability is going to jump from $3 million to $4.7 million. And if it goes to 8.65, which is very unlikely that this will happen, it will go to 1.5 million. Just to let you know that CalPERS have already announced that they are changing their rates from 7.65 to 7. So you are automatically going to see those increases, and it's going to automatically impact how much you have to put into the plan now as well. That's just one factor of the calculation. Of course, how the market perform and many other factors goes into the calculation, but the numbers are all projecting that it's going up, your liability is going to go up, and your contribution is going to go up as well. So that's basically what's happening with your pension plan and with CalPERS. Some of the required communications that we have to communicate to you, and this is mainly boilerplate language, and you want it to be boilerplate language. Usually when it's not, that means that we are having problems and issues. But this is really the only required part of the presentation that I have to go through. I'm going to first cover our responsibility as your independent auditors. We are mainly responsible for issuing an opinion on the financial statements, whether it's fairly stated in all material respects or not. We're also responsible for evaluating the town's internal controls and make sure that they're properly designed. We're responsible for evaluating the tone at the top and make sure that management and town council are sending the right message to the rest of the organization about the importance of controls and consequences of committing fraud and things of that nature. We're responsible for evaluating the town's compliance with laws, regulations, contracts, and grants that could have a material effect on your financial statements. We're responsible for ensuring that your financial statements are clear and transparent, and that we're not trying to basically make it look gray, that the reader is not really clear what we're talking about. And then finally, we're responsible for communicating with the town council. Management have a lot of responsibilities in this process, even though we are hired to certify your financial statements. Our audit is on a test basis. We look at material items, so we have thresholds. We don't normally look below those thresholds. So our audit does not provide an absolute assurance, but it only provides reasonable assurance about your financial statements, whether they're free of material misstatements or not. And therefore, management still retain the responsibility for the completeness and accuracy of those financials. Of course, we have responsibility as your independent auditors as well. Management is the one responsible for establishing and maintaining internal controls, for making the financial records available to us during the audit process, for adjusting the financial statements to correct any material misstatements, to establish controls to prevent and detect fraud, inform us of all known and suspected fraud, to comply with laws and regulations, and to take corrective actions on audit findings. In terms of independence, we have to remain independent from the town. This is solely our responsibility. We have internal processes that we follow to make sure that each individual member on the team have no direct or indirect relation with town or town staff. We also evaluate any additional services that we provide to the town and make sure that they do not impair our independence. And we, of course, determine that we are independent from the town. In terms of timing of the audit, we believe that the audit was performed in the time frame communicated during our engagement letter. There were some new accounting policies that the town considered and implemented some of them during the year. So I listed what they are, and nothing was significant. A lot of it was just additional disclosures and clarifications, but nothing major. Also wanted to alert you that some of the numbers in your financial statements are estimates, and it's totally okay to have estimates as long as there is a reasonable basis behind these estimates. So some of the estimates are your allowance for uncollectible accounts, your useful life of capital assets, your pension plan, and your retiree medical benefits obligations. In terms of sensitive disclosures, I just highlighted some few of the no disclosures in the financial statements that I believe provide additional helpful information to the reader of the financial statements. We're pleased to announce to you that we encountered no difficulties during our audit. Actually, it was very pleasant. I mean, of course, we love to come to Yountville. It's such a lovely place to be, and really working with town staff, it's been very pleasant and very easy to work with. So I appreciate that for sure. There were adjustments and reclassifying entries as a result of our audits, and management have posted all of these adjustment entries. There were no significant risk or exposure that were identified to us other than the standard matters identified to us in our legal letter. We're pleased to say that we had no disagreement with management, that we had no material weaknesses in internal controls. We did identify a few things in internal controls that we communicated to management, but they were not significant enough to bring to the council. Normally, professional standards allow us to rank those deficiencies based on the level of significance, and if they're not very significant, we can just communicate them to management and follow up next year to see if they were addressed or not. So, and that's what we've done. In terms of representations, we asked management to provide us with a representation letter. It's a letter that basically management letting us know that they have recorded all transactions, that they are not aware of any fraud, that they own all the assets, that they have no plan of selling those assets. And it's a very long list of representations that we really put a lot of reliance on. And we obtained that from management on December 27th. We're not aware of any significant accounting or auditing matter for which management consulted with other accountants. So normally, if management were to hire another CPA firm to get their opinion about some audit matters, this CPA firm have to consult with us to make sure that they have all the facts and circumstances before they advise the town. And we're not aware that this has occurred. I understand that the town had hired some consultant to help with the day-to-day, and that's not really something that that counts. In terms of written communications, other than our engagement letter and the representation letter, there were no other communication with management, and there were no material uncertainties relating to events and conditions, and we have not become aware of any fraud or illegal acts. I do want to emphasize that we have not become aware does not mean that no fraud exists. Our audit is designed to consider fraud when we're planning our audit. So it's kind of a negative assurance where we basically say that really nothing came to our attention, but fraud can still exist, but nothing was brought to our attention or came to our attention during our audit process. With that, I basically just wanted to give you a list of all the new accounting standards that are coming your way that will probably keep Maria busy for the next few years. And we'll definitely work closely with the town to help implementing those standards. We host a client training seminar every year that normally we address those new accounting standards, and we talk to our clients about what the steps are that would be needed to implement those, in addition to one-on-one meetings with each client and talking about the plan of how those would be addressed. I would say that the most significant would be the retiree medical benefits. If you offer retiree medical benefits, then you will now have to report that on your balance sheet as an additional liability. With that, I want to thank you for the opportunity to provide service for the town of Yountville, and I'm more than happy to answer questions.
Any questions from the council or staff for Mr. Badawi? Councilmember Mueller, did you have a question? Oh, sorry, I thought you did. Well, thank you so very much. We appreciate your help, and we're very proud of our Chief Financial Officer for another award for our CAFR. So thank you, and thank you for tonight.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Ahmed. Okay. Well, moving along from the fun stuff. Now we are going to have our first public hearing. We are going to consider a municipal code amendment for the urgency ordinance extension. And I believe that this has to have a vote of all four of us. Is that correct? Because the vote has to be 4 out of 5 of the council. With the mayor away, we're going to have a unanimous vote for this.
Yep, that's correct.
So tonight we have before you an extension of the urgency ordinance that implements the new state law for second dwellings. And we've opted to...
You need to pull your microphone towards you.
To extend the term of the urgency ordinance for the maximum time allowed by state law, which should give us enough time to consider more options and to take it to the ZDRB and then return here to you before the expiration of that. So that's it in a nutshell, unless you have something to add.
Oh, that's correct. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions of the staff?
What I would point out is we do have some folks that have been monitoring this in the audience, and what we're looking at, we're taking a look at what some other communities are doing, and we may have some nuances that when we bring back the more permanent second dwelling ordinance, we want an opportunity to learn from what some other agencies are doing and have a little more opportunity to have a discussion with ZDRB and council. So we don't anticipate taking an extended amount of time with the urgency. Staff wants to move this forward in a timely and thoughtful manner and gather some input, because we do think in some areas there's real value to some of the concepts. We also know that there's real fear in some of those areas, and we need to try to provide a good balance and an understanding of what all is involved. I do want to point that out, that we're taking more time to do a better job. And unfortunately, that means we need to extend the urgency ordinance so that we will be able to bring back a better quality, comprehensive second dwelling ordinance, hopefully in the next 60 to 90 days.
Yes, go ahead. I was just going to say that that I would like to open the public comment period on this. And if anyone in the audience would like to come and speak on this subject, please come forward.
Hi, my name's Pam Reeves. I live at 6887 Jefferson Street. And I just wanted to reiterate a comment that I made last time about this particular ordinance, and that is the requirement for 6,000 square foot lots in order to be eligible to have a second unit. And I feel like the spirit of this whole change by the state of California is that there's not enough housing, and for our town to spread out isn't really a big possibility, but to do infill building with the use of second units is a very viable option. But I think that when you restrict it to certain sizes, you won't get the kind of robust activity that's required for this to make it a a viable help for the community members. I feel like, especially in the historic district, there was always a push to have smaller lots in order to have the feel of the hodgepodge, as we used to say, of development in Old Town. And so you have a lot of smaller lots. And I feel like the 6,000-foot restriction is unfair to those homeowners who have a smaller lot. And also, those are typically, they may be, I don't know, a lot of older residents and a lot of lower income residents who have been here a very long time, who may be at the age when they need more financial assistance from their only source of income or their source of investment, which is their home. And it might allow families to stay in a location where they've grown up by either the parent moving into the second unit or the child moving into the second unit. And I feel like the amount of activity that you would get from this second unit, seeing as its owner-occupied requirement, would not be out of line, even on a small lot. So I would hope that you would take that in consideration, and certainly that the ZDRB would also discuss that potential. I feel like it's important for the life of the town. We all notice that there's a lot of empty houses that are not occupied a lot of the time, or they're occupied by people who don't have a stake in the community, and that we need more people who have that stake, whether they rent it out to someone who's employed in town or they have it for their family members, doesn't really matter. That vibrancy that comes with occupation is still there. Thank you.
And if I could, just to the pros and cons associated with owner occupancy, lot size, are just some of those issues that we're going to be evaluating when we look at it, because there are, again, depending on what your goal is, there are different ways and balances to help achieve that. So we're taking, again, those are definitely on our discussion list from a staff and as we bring back, because like I say, if we're trying to make housing, you know, and that's been the direction, but we also need to do it in a balance with the existing neighborhood.
All right, is there any other public comment? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the council for discussion. Who would like to begin?
We're just looking to agree to move forward, correct?
Right, I do want to point out one thing, that we were so very efficient in our staff report, that if you do not extend the urgency ordinance, then we have nothing and we immediately default to the state standard. So we don't think that that's an appropriate outcome. But I do want to point out to the audience that we don't anticipate this ordinance being around a long time. We do anticipate, and we have given serious thought, that there is something more thoughtful that needs to come forward from the community conversation.
Thank you, and I echo that. The whole state of California, and that's one of the top priorities for the whole state, is housing and affordability of housing, and this would certainly, help that situation for us. So with that, I will entertain a motion to move forward.
I move that we adopt ordinance number 17-457, extending an urgency ordinance amending the Yountville Municipal Code to conform to new state statutorily mandated second residential unit ordinance requirements.
I second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Michelle, do you think you need to take a voice vote on that?
No, it's unanimous. That's fine. Thank you for asking.
And our final administrative regular item this evening, moving along, is to request Town Council authorization to send letters of support for AB1 Fraser and SB1 Beal related to transportation project spending for state and local projects. This is the other big issue for the whole state.
Very briefly, Council, the town protocols dictate that the town council has had to have an established position or statement on something prior for either the mayor or the town manager to send a support or an opposition letter. In this particular case, we do have which the league is also supporting and endorsing. We have both SB and AB1 moving forward in the Senate and Assembly appropriately that are endorsed. So the council has asked that we put this on, so we have enough lead time so the item and the draft letters are there for you need to provide policy direction as to whether you're okay with us sending the letters for the mayor's signature or not. And I will point out that we will also have this on as a generic discussion. I shouldn't say generic, but it will be the topic of legislative support and advocacy will be part of our protocol update discussion.
So I have a question. Have you reached out to NVTA to see if they would also give a countywide support letter?
They are. I haven't directly, but I know Kate's very excited about this because, I should say the executive director, Kate Miller, is excited because right now this is the first significant transportation funding mechanism that has had a sponsor come forward in both houses with some level of indication that it has enough capacity to get to the governor's office for signature. So all of the transportation alignment, if you will, all of those folks are really working hard to steer and have quality discussions on these two. So it's certainly something that I anticipate will probably, it will morph a little as it goes through the legislative process. I'm sure the league will keep us very well briefed and updated, but as it stands currently, the league policy analysts and lobbyists are also working proactively with the staffers from both of these folks and are seeing positive. I do have to just put something different important to Yountville because just to give you an idea, our highway gas user tax allocation right now is only around $60,000. So I want you to think about what can we do to keep our roads in repair if we only limited ourselves to $60,000 a year that came from that. The answer is not a lot. You currently know that because you spend considerable general funds. We are fortunate that we have Measure T coming up, but in general, we're in a much fortuitous situation compared to many cities. We're just not. So this is a big step forward for California. Yes.
There being no further questions from the council, or are there? No. I would like to open it to public comment. If anyone in the audience would like to comment on, these are letters by Senator Fraser and, Senator Beal and Assemblymember Fraser that are almost identical, and they talk about a lot of different ways to raise more transportation funding. So it is very important. Would anyone like to speak to it? Seeing none, I will now close the public comment period and bring it back to council. And are you looking for just direction?
No, you have to take a vote on it or whatever. We need. Okay. You're here, so you might as well vote on it. Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right. So then, could I have a?
Could I ask a question first, since this is my first time at this? I actually read the bills and went to the California legislature website and read the bill analysis and this and that, and it was pretty slow sledding. There's a lot in there. I will say, for me personally, and as a member of the council and trying to set a policy, I don't have an objection to have a good concept of a transportation policy set forth by the state legislature, setting out the need, and putting in some oversight. I'm not certain that we as a town should weigh in on this is the appropriate tax, this is the appropriate fee, this is the appropriate way to fund it. So I just throw that out there for council discussion of if we were to send a letter, might it be preferable to say something like conceptually we agree with the plan, but maybe not get into the weeds on this, that, the other.
I think in general that's what this letter really is, because we're indicating support to both the assembly member and the senator and their staff for taking the lead, because it will get morphed in discussion, and these are some elements. This is the draft format that the league has encouraged, and then we customize a couple things to talk about where we spend money, but your point's very valid. We will continue to be looking at and monitoring this, and right now it's very conceptual as to the elements, but there, and you are correct not knowing the historical on the framework. Many of the items in there have been under play for a number of administrations and discussions, so it's the first time we've seen some willingness in the legislature to look at adjusting some things. And I would be the first one to say, you're probably right that it's not our prerogative. We don't have the information to do the analysis to tell them whether, $35 in vehicle license fee increase or $65. But I think what you're really saying in your support letter is we support doing something about increasing funding in transportation, and that we're going to continue to weigh in on it and try to make sure that we improve it statewide. And I can guarantee you will probably have a briefing over your next couple days on transportation funding.
Is that a satisfactory answer?
It is. I'm especially just looking at the paragraph that begins at the bottom of the page. The proposal takes the approach of raising revenue over a variety of sources such as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I just wonder if we're getting too close to it there, and could just say that we want the proposal takes the approach of raising revenue and in addition includes a series of reforms to improve efficiency, transparency, and accountability. And that's my only concern, is going on the record with numbers like that.
That's certainly something to consider.
Well, I guess to that point, I kind of like the specifics myself, because if you don't say what you're supporting now, in general, even though there's a lot of specifics in here, once you go through gut and amend, this could turn into, something about, fishing requirements or something. So I'm kind of happy with having some kind of specifics that talk about transportation and transportation-related numbers, so that if SB 1, a few months from now turns into a fishing license requirement or something, at least you've outlined what you were talking about here. And you weren't talking about, the gut and amend bill, which it might evolve into. So that's why I'm okay with it, and it's really a matter of the league doesn't really come at us a lot and ask for support. And I think this is something that we've, as cities, have really kind of got to get a handle on, because we don't, as Steve pointed out, except for, Measure T locally in Napa County, have any way to really, especially the county, they've got 450 miles of road or something. They really don't have any way to take care of that. So I support it.
Oh, thank you. That's an excellent explanation, and kind of, like I say, puts it in context for me, so thank you.
And for me, I'm comfortable with it because we desperately do need the transportation funding. And just driving on the roads in Napa County will convince you of that. But nonetheless, I feel better that it says such as, rather than it's not really written in stone in this. So I can support this as well. So are we ready to have a motion?
We just need a minute order, right, to move ahead.
The recommendation is asking for a policy determination. You've discussed policy now, and I would recommend a motion to direct staff to authorize the mayor to sign letter and direct staff to send it on accordingly.
Make a motion to ask the mayor to sign the letters.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
The motion passes. And now, oh, goody. We're going to have a staff informational report on the Veterans Park update.
Very short presentation tonight, Vice Mayor. Tonight we are looking at the Veterans Memorial Park construction update. So the first slide you see is the park looking from west from Washington Street towards the plaza. It looks like quite a mess. What you see here are some required stormwater controls, and the contractor has been very proactive in his working around the weather. He used some of the chipped material to provide an area where he could park equipment and work even in muddy and rainy conditions. As a result, I'm happy to say that they were setting forms today. The big star is set earlier this afternoon.
Cool.
They are going to try to pour a big part of that out tomorrow before the rain sets in. That's what their plan is now. So if we go to the next slide, you can see that the light fixtures have been installed. The majority of the electric has been installed, including the outlets in the walls and some of the other electric features. Next slide. Plaza with the seat wall looking west, so you can see how the seat wall is starting to take shape. To give you a little bit of perspective on some size, you can look at the slice of life piece of artwork there. So it's quite a substantial. It's going to be a really nice rock feature. It's going to be quite an improvement on what we had in the past. Next slide. For example, we have the amphitheater rock walls. You can see two of them are pretty close to done, and this is a part of the project that he's able to work on. As long as it's not pouring down rain, they're able to set stone. So it's a really like I said, he's being very aggressive in trying to work through the weather, and despite some of what we've gone through in the past few weeks, he's been able to get a significant amount of progress done. Happy to answer any questions you might have on the park construction before I hand it over to Parks and Rec Director Holland.
Any questions for staff?
Over to me. Thank goodness you guys picked that rock wall, right? It's so beautiful. It's going to be amazing. So my part of the update is on the Veterans Memorial Park sculpture. So the ad hoc committee met back in early December, and we've been working on the call for artists since then. It did go live today. We have a designated page on the town's website, which I just have a snapshot up here. Obviously, it's not meant for you to read it, but you can to view that at townofyountville.com/veterans sculpture. There's also a quick link on the front page. And the cafe, which is the callforentry.org, is where we're going to take all of the entries. And that will remain open through March 15th. So on this page is information that we discussed in the ad hoc committee about making sure that the artists get a good understanding of hopefully what we're looking for, the history of Yountville, the connection to the veterans home, and really the goal of what this piece of art is. They're also encouraged to schedule a time for site visits. They could even schedule a time for a Skype site visit if they're not here, but it is limited to national artists, so they have to be artists of the United States. So I'm very excited to see that out and going, and hopefully we'll get some really great entries. So with that, we're doing a large press release and push on tons of different other platforms to try to encourage people to go visit the site and take a look at the project. I have a short list of about 6 artists who've already reached out to me prior to this, some locally here in Yountville that are interested. So as this goes live today, I'm also reaching out to them to make sure they're aware. So happy to answer any questions. The timeline after March 15th is staff will go through and jury first those submissions just for the basics, that they met the basic criteria that was set in the call for artists. And then the ad hoc committee will go through and formally jury the art as it came in based on the criteria that they set up. And that's all done through Cafe's website. So it's an online system where they're able to score, and then it drills it down, and I'm able to go in from the back end and see how everything has come down. And then the ad hoc committee decided then to meet to go over the top 5 to 10 in person before trying to move forward with some sort of decision. So that process may adapt a little bit as we see how it all plays out. They do know that they do not want a public voting process for this particular piece of art, that the ad hoc committee will make a recommendation to the council on that. So I'm hoping that will happen mid to end of April. So we did put stipulation in the call that the piece, we're hoping the piece to be installed by the end of 2017. But that obviously will be based on what the outcome is, and if the potential artist needs more time, then, and that's the one that's chosen, obviously, we'll accommodate that as well. So, thank you.
Thank you, Samantha.
Absolutely.
So now it's time for council meeting reports and comments and other agenda items, requests. The mayor has submitted his reports electronically, and so they're available. Do they need to be read out?
They do not.
Okay.
Available for viewing.
And there's no other reports at the moment? Well, I'll report that we did attend the Napa County League of Governments quarterly meeting on January 12th, and it was in St. Helena at Trey Posty, which used to be Go Fish. It was nice. And we had a very nice presentation by Rachel Guinness, the executive director of Lily Pad Homes. And Lily Pad Homes is addressing the very issues that we were talking about with our, infill in the town of Yountville. And Rachel Guinness had very interesting adaptations that she was able to do. She did it first for herself, for her family, because she was a single mom and needed the money. And it's worked out very well, and now she's made a business of it. But it's, taking tiny homes into your own home, sort of. So it was very interesting and worthwhile. And that's the only update I have. Anything else? All right, then. Seeing nothing else, I will entertain a motion to adjourn to our next meeting of not April. I will do we have a closed session? We do not. So I will entertain a motion to adjourn to our next regular meeting of February 7th, 2017.
At 6 p.m.
Move to adjourn.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.